Hi, and welcome to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. My name is Bill Moore. I'm the founder of Food Truck Training Group on Facebook, co-owner with my beautiful wife, Melissa, of our food truck. It's called Food Truck 101, and I am the executive director of the National Street Food Vendors Association, which is a nonprofit dedicated to education, advocacy, and uplifting all food vendors. Today, I'm going to be talking about change. But first, I want to remind you guys about the Food Truck Owners Expo in Orlando, Florida this year, November 12th and 13th, and this year being 2024. I'll be there giving 3 classes, one on writing a profitable menu, one on marketing in the off-season, and one on how we as food vendors need to have a collective voice so we can effect positive change in our own industry. Again, that's November 12th and 13th in Orlando, Florida. Go to ftoexpo.com, place your order for the tickets today, and when you do, put in code FTTG15 for a 15% discount. I want to take a minute to also thank Table Needs for sponsoring this episode of the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. Table Needs is a full-service POS system capable of handling your busy food truck, cash, credit card, and reporting needs. Check out the link in the description for more information about Table Needs. So now let's talk about change. I had a manager that used to work for me at Shoney's, and he was fond of saying the only people that like change are babies. And to an extent, that is correct. So let's talk about how when you have to make change in your organization, you can make it a little bit less painful. The first thing you want to do is communicate clearly and early. If a change has to be made, it is much better to make the change early on in your operations than it is to allow people to develop a habit and then turn around and say, hey, this habit you developed isn't good anymore and we need to change. So now you've got to not only break a habit, but then get them to understand a new change or a new procedure. One thing you can do to kind of help that out is to use I statements. And what that means is you're going to say something like, I think this change will help us to streamline our operations. And then you explain how that streamline is going to help them perform their job better. Remember, any change to your mode of operation right now needs to do one of two things. It either needs to enhance service or it needs to enhance profitability. If you're not improving one of those two things, then there's really no reason to make the change, because the change will come across as pointless to your staff. You want to highlight the benefits for everybody involved, and that's not only the crew, but also the guests. Again, if it doesn't help the efficiency of your staff, make the job a little bit easier. If it doesn't help the experience of the guests, there's really no reason to do it. So you want to highlight those benefits and how either your guest or the employees are going to gain something from making this change. If you're working with a lot of family members, whether it's brothers and sisters or children, or your parents, you've got to involve them in the decision-making process. That gets them to understand the why behind this particular decision. People work better when they understand the why. And if they don't understand the why, they're not going to make the change. They're going to be resistant to the change, and then they're also going to fall back into the old habit because they don't understand the importance of the change that's being required of them. As an owner, you want to provide support and training. Training is not, you do this, and then yelling at them when they forget and do it the old way. Training is an ongoing process. Part of training is to remind people to do whatever the procedure is. You don't yell, you don't get upset. Just, hey, remember we changed that. We now do it this way. And you keep that positive attitude because people are going to make mistakes. Again, if you're changing a procedure after you've been open for a year or 2 years or 10 years, you have a whole bunch of people that have this ingrained habit that you got to break. So it's on you to help them to remember the new procedure. So you train and coach and talk to them all throughout the shift and then celebrate with them when they remember to do it right. You want to be mindful of family dynamics if you work, again, with brothers, sisters, spouses, children, parents. You have to remember those dynamics. Working with family members is difficult because you never get a break from each other. So problems at home end up being transferred to problems at work and vice versa. I understand staffing issues, and I understand that sometimes the only people we can count on are our family members. But remember, you're counting on them, which means they have value to you. So you, as being in charge, have to allow them the opportunity to understand, again, explain the why this change has to happen, and then give them the ability to make the mistake and fall back into the old habit, because they're going to. It's not an opportunity for you to yell at them, say, hey, we changed that. After you've gotten through the little rush period or whatever, you remind them, hey, we made that change on that procedure. Don't forget to do it on the next orders coming up, because again, you've given them the opportunity to get a habit out of whatever the old procedure was. Now you got to break that habit, and that takes time, and it requires your patience. You want to handle any resistance with care, whether it's a family member or it's a stranger that you've hired and has worked with you for the last 2 years. They're going to have a little bit of resistance because they're used to doing things differently, and now you've asked them to change. So you got to handle that resistance and handle it with care. The easiest way to handle it with care is to ask them what their opinion is. So, hey, we're getting ready to make this change. What do you think about it? Is there a way that we can make this change even better than what I'm thinking we can do? And as long as you explain the why behind the change, it gets them thinking, because our brains are trained to answer questions. So is there a better way to do this? And it gets them thinking, and they may come up with something you hadn't considered, and now you've made the procedure even better, because now it's a group effort rather than you being the dictator and saying, we will do it this way from this point forward because I think it's the best way. And it may not be the best way. You want to celebrate wins together. So in the paradigm of us having made a change, we're going to celebrate when people remember to do that change without being prompted. If your change is to the greeting and they remember it without you saying, hey, we got to do the greeting differently, then celebrate that. Thank you for remembering that change. If it's a change to how much lettuce goes on a sandwich, or a change to a cooking procedure, and they remembered it without your prompt, celebrate that. That's a big deal, because they're learning and remembering what you've asked them to change, and now they've performed it. When you start to attach those positive feelings to that change in behavior, they're more likely to duplicate that change in behavior going forward, because they want to get those accolades. They want to be celebrated. They want to have that little pat on the back because they remembered. That's a big deal to them. It needs to be a big deal to you. You got to celebrate those wins. So change doesn't have to be a source of stress, and usually it is, because we've all had a boss or a corporation that sent down a policy that changes the way we do something, and we look at that change and go, this is stupid. And in many cases, it could be stupid, but it doesn't matter. We're not the ones writing the rules and regulations for that particular business. Our bosses are. So in this case, it's now reversed. You're the boss, and you're requiring a change that your staff may not agree with. So it needs to be as stress-free as possible, because any kind of change is going to be an issue. Again, the only people that like change are babies. They want to get that new fresh diaper. So you want to communicate clearly. You want to involve everybody in the process. And part of the process is, do y'all think this is a good idea? This is why I would like to do this. What do you all think? Because remember, anybody that you felt confident enough to hire has experience in something. And they have experience in something that you don't have. Even a 16-year-old that you hired fresh off the street has experience in dealing with something you don't have the experience of. Ask their input. How would y'all feel if we did this if you were a guest coming up to the food truck? And it doesn't matter what the procedural change is. Get that feedback. Ask your employees, ask your family members if you work with a lot of family. Get the feedback. Remember, your goal is to improve the business, not just change something for the sake of changing it. If you change something just for the sake of changing it, you're going to have a hard time getting people to do it. But if they understand the why, like I've said before, they're more likely to do it. Just remember, you want to unify your crew, whether they're family members or they're strangers, or it's a mix of family members and strangers. You want them to be unified in the decision that's been made, and it's going to make them more likely to repeat what you want them to do, this procedural change, if they understand the why, and then you've helped them and coached them along when they're doing the changes. Being a dictator, yelling at them, saying, hey, we changed that, you're not supposed to do it that way, is only going to make them feel animosity towards you and less likely to continue the change that you want them to do. So just make sure the change makes sense, make sure that you have the support of the staff, and make sure they understand the why. And if there is a discussion about it, the discussion happens behind closed doors. You don't do it in front of guests. You don't do it when you're tired and you're angry because it's been a long, hot day. You do it when it makes sense for you guys to sit down and have that sensible conversation. Okay, we got to make this change. What do y'all think? And then value the input, because again, they have experiences you do not have. Thank you guys so much for listening to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. Please take a moment to follow our podcast, and if you really like what we do, then please support us. There's links in the description to make that happen. Every little bit does help keep us going. And until next time, you guys have a profitable day.